Well, I have everything off here. Just wanted to go over quickly what's been going on, give you a little update. Welcome back, everybody. Speed Culture Studios. Thanks for stopping in. The car has been down for 14 days or so. It's been painful. So please go take a look at the video that explains everything that's going on. But for now, I'll give just a really quick and dirty overview to spare everyone's time. Went to Soho Motorsports in Charlotte about 12 or 13 days ago. Got the car retuned because we had the exhaust changed up geometry wise and also diameter to 2.5 inch. Wanted to make sure everything was running perfectly. The tune went fine, made 333 horsepower, 276 foot-pounds of torque, made the 2.5 hour drive home with no problems, parked the car. The next day, got in the car to drive, seemed fine going through town, but as soon as I tried to accelerate onto the interstate, there was nothing. The car wouldn't go over 3,000 RPM, which leads people to believe that it was in valet mode. However, stick around for more of the saga, but basically limped the car home, did the stuff that you would normally try in situations like this, disconnected the battery for several minutes, checked connections and cables, got under the car and made sure the O2 sensors were hooked up fine and everything was working. Kind of blew out the air boxes a little bit, inspected the MAF sensors, did all sorts of stuff. Reached out to Soho Motorsports. They were kind enough to respond to me on a Saturday, which is awesome, to try a couple of other things. He ended up sending out some Ecutek cables, which you saw in the other video as well, and we got a code. We also did some data logging, and we'll talk about some of the things that he was able to find through the data logs. But we just tried a number of things, and 14 days to this point have gone by and the car's been down, so it's been very, very painful. So in that last video, you saw that I kind of left you hanging a little bit. The Ecutek setup with the cables and everything connected, it did pull a code, so let's take a look at that. So we got the Ecutek cables, and I just wanted to show you a little bit about what we did to get to where we're at today. So we have Ecutek hooked to the car and the app open. It recognizes us, and here you go. This is what the app looks like. So there are a bunch of useful tools here, including data logging. You can log all your trips, save them to your computer, send them to your tuner, but there's a bunch of other stuff on here as well. But what we've been using is the DTC tool, and you saw in the last video that we had a code, an ECM code there at the top. And that code has been a U1001 code. That is a communication line error code, and that's what we've been dealing with. And that's something I've cleared at least through the app several times. And we go out of the screen and go back in it, and you can see that code pops up again. So that's something we've been dealing with, and I might have to go back to Soho to get that cleared completely. While we have the app open, there's a bunch of other stuff to look at too. ECM tool, performance analyzer, your 0 to 60 stuff. You can literally switch maps from the app, which is pretty awesome. So even if you're not flashing the car ever, this is actually a really helpful tool, so definitely recommend it. So you saw that the code was a U1001. It can be a number of things. Obviously, if you do any WebMDing online through the forums and the Facebook groups, you'll see some of the worst case scenarios, which include a fried ECU. So that's what I was really worried about. Driving the car around a little bit also, it would go over 3,000 RPM from time to time, but there was just no power, so I was worried about the transmission being out. But ultimately, it seemed kind of like a coincidence, or it seemed too much of a coincidence to have had the car retuned with Ecutek software, and literally the next day it was not working, throwing codes. But again, there was no check engine light. The car sounded fine. It wasn't misfiring or anything weird. There was a heavy, more than normal, heavy fuel smell, so I figured it was kind of in a limp mode. It was trying to protect itself from anything real crazy, which is kind of cool, but also frustrating. So I sent some data logs to Nick at Soho Motorsports, and AFR seemed fine. There was a bunch of other stuff that seemed fine, but what there was a discrepancy in that he was able to detect was that voltage to the accelerator pedal, the accelerator sensor, was normal. But the voltage being received at the throttle body sensors was about half, or just barely. It was barely registering any voltage. So that was concerning. That leads me again to kind of worst case scenarios of being an ECU problem. Either the sensor was bad or the ECU is bad. So signals being sent from the accelerator to the ECU, but not making it to the sensor, or the sensor itself was bad, which wouldn't be the end of the world. So the story keeps getting more difficult and more frustrating, because during some of the logs, the car was doing different things. It still wasn't running properly, but it wasn't, being stopped at the 3,000 RPM. It would go higher, like I said, in some cases, still sounding normal, but it was making no power. So we were kind of at a loss. Nothing seemed to be wrong. So limp mode was kind of a weird thing. Valet mode generally limits how high the RPM goes. So that kind of didn't make sense, especially considering the fact that I switched through all the maps and it was doing the same thing, reacting the same way in every map. 1, 2, I don't have anything on 3 and 4, and 8 valet mode. Even selecting it again and then selecting a different map, try to get it out of valet mode, wasn't doing anything. So again, big shout out to Soho Motorsports, very helpful, doing things late in the evening, responding on weekends. It truly was awesome, sending me the Ecutek cables. So although my feeling was that this was tune related, the fact that Nick and Soho in general has been so helpful throughout this whole process, not a bad word to say about the guys, and I would definitely recommend getting to their shop if you need any work done, especially on a Nissan or Infiniti type car. So where are we at here? Nick sent me a ROM file to try to upload. Something's an additional element to this whole story. My computer is not downloading the software. I contacted Ecutek. They said something about the thing not being registered, even though I have a registration code and a license ID and things like that from Soho. I tried installing it on a different computer, still didn't work. So all I have is the app, which we looked at. So Nick wanted me to do one more log in valet mode so we could kind of rule that out being the issue. So I got everything set up, got the app set up. I tried to switch the car to valet mode and it wouldn't go in. It wouldn't select valet mode. So a weird thing. I thought, whatever, I'll just continue on and we'll take another log anyway. So I got in the car, started cruising around. Again, there was no weird symptoms or signs of the car doing anything funny. If you were cruising around town, it's when you tried to accelerate that it gave these kind of weird reactions, as far as just revving up and not shifting, and not going above a certain RPM with no power, blah blah blah. So anyway, I got out of town and out of the neighborhood and started to accelerate. The car seemed fine. Weird, I thought. So I stopped the log, saved that one, and started another one with a little bit more aggressive driving. And the car seemed totally normal. So again, I had opened this whole thing up, looked at all my connections. That code sometimes can be, traced to bad grounds. So I checked all my grounding points, in the engine bay and wherever I could find one. I don't know where they're all at, but, checked every single one I could find, looked at the throttle bodies and the connections, the cables, made sure they were all tight, kind of gave them a tap, just for good measure. And like I said, just kind of checked everything out, made sure all the connections were good here. Again, got underneath the car to make sure the O2 sensors were in good shape and at least connected properly. But I'm not really sure if doing any of those things had any impact on getting this car running normal again. But you can see that it's still throwing that U1001 code. Somebody made a comment on the last video saying that that code actually is a bug from ECU, and that they have the code and the car still runs fine. So I'm hoping that's the case. But ultimately, honestly, still really don't know what the problem was. I had never selected valet mode, from getting back from the Soho Motorsports the following day. I had never tried valet mode out, so the fact that it'd be stuck in valet mode, I wasn't really sure how that would happen. Like Nick said, if anything happens to the computer, the ECU with the Ecutek software, it generally happens immediately after installing the tune, or while the tune is being adjusted while the car is actually on the dyno. So we were hesitant to believe that was the case. Ecutek really hasn't responded when I contact them directly. But again, Soho's been great, and I guess we're just driving the car. I've driven it over the last couple of days, gradually further and further for longer periods of time, just to make sure nothing is popping up again. Kind of got to build that trust back. You know, it's super frustrating when your car goes down, but ultimately when you are modifying your vehicle, adding parts, updating software, retuning, you know, changing parameters, beating on it in general, you have to expect that some of these types of things are going to happen, and you kind of have to roll with the punches. It is frustrating. It's annoying, especially when they're down for 2 weeks plus. That's difficult to deal with. I was actually just considered trading this thing. You know, I got bored of it as it was sitting in the garage. I just kind of thought, well, I'm going to get it fixed up and running, and we're getting rid of it. You know, you start to kind of resent it and hate it. But I will say that driving it just over the last couple of days after we got this thing running again, I say that kind of, I don't know, we didn't get it running. It just kind of started running. But after driving it for the last couple of days, I'm falling in love with it again. It's a lot of fun. It sounds great. It feels good. It's comfortable. It looks really good. So we're not going to trade it in. You know, the fact that it's running again and there wasn't really a true resolution, you know, as far as anything that we did, you know, unless tapping on the throttle bodies and the sensors a little bit helped, which I doubt. But the fact that we didn't physically resolve it, it makes me a little nervous still, just because we're going to potentially run into the same issue. So I'm going to take the car back up to Charlotte in the next week or so, and just have them kind of do a once over, see if they can actually truly get that code cleared or figure out what it is. They can look at it a little bit more closely. It's difficult to do some things remotely sometimes. But for now, I think we're just going to act like it never happened, honestly. We're going to treat her right. We're going to make her feel good so she doesn't disappoint us. I kind of like it with the engine cover off, though, so I think I'm going to keep it like this for a while. It just kind of looks more mechanical and like a real engine, so I think I'm going to leave it. Update, they did ship the new AFE dry filters. These are the Speed Daddy ones I've been running with for 6 months or so. We'll replace those. They shipped them last week, but for some reason they're still going to take almost a week to get here. That's kind of annoying. You saw in a recent video too that the sway bars are finally in, so we're going to get those bad boys installed as well. So a lot of good stuff coming up yet. I gotta park this thing in the garage more often. Looks nice in here. Well, stay tuned for a lot more stuff to come. I appreciate you guys following along. Again, AFE dry filters, we'll do a little review and rundown of those. Hotchkiss sway bars, fronts and rears. We'll get those installed before and after video. Run back up to Soho, really see if things are fixed with this thing or not. Some mountain run plans, more car meets, more races, a lot of good stuff coming up. So thank you guys for following along to this point. Subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate your support very, very much. And we'll see you in the next video. Tell ya, that looks way better. I think that's how we're going to keep it. Except I am going to put this shield back on. We want to kind of keep some of that hot engine bay air from getting in the intake. So we'll get that shield put back on here. Yeah, that looks sick. See you in the next one.